G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players that are going to bring a value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Hef, and fresh off a pod recording without me is Dos in Case. How you going, boys? How's the pod recording?
It's great. There's nothing I enjoy more than talking about fantasy classics, so it was 45 minutes well spent. But no, it was actually very good fun. We talked all things rookies and the cheap players, so that's where I kind of come into my sweet spot. That's about the only thing I'm good for, I think, in fantasy classics. So hopefully I imparted some good wisdom, although I think I probably imparted some really bad wisdom as I got laughed at a lot. But
I don't know, you even poo-pooed one of my non-rookie selections as well. So Kays, I reckon, might be in for a big year in the classic arena this year.
Okay, here we go, yeah.
Probably some deep cuts too on the rookie side.
25,000 for a change
16th year breakout into the, maybe top 10,000.
All right, well, we're not here to talk about classics, so we'll leave that one in the past. But we are here to talk about some Keeper League players. So tonight we're talking about Sydney, West Coast and Western Bulldogs. Just a reminder for the any new listeners out there, we don't talk about rookies because we've done so much stuff on rookies in the past. We have a whole episode dedicated rookies for our members. So we're just talking about players that are kind of not 2G4P, that is too good for the podcast. Basically people that average under 80 last season, and they're the ones we think are worth picking up in our leagues. But Dossie, I heard a little rumour throughout the week that you actually gave away your lawnmower 4.0 because you had already bought one. You were a previous owner of a Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 before they came on to support the show. Is that right?
Yeah, mate. Big fan of the product. Huge fan of the product. Don't need one myself. Already got one in the shed.
So that's why we had one to give away, which we did, by the way, give away.
Who got that one?
Social.
Who got Dossie's Manscaped? I only used it once or twice. So.
AJS Hawker won that one. So well done to him. He was one of the people that retweeted it and shared it on Facebook and retweeted it on Twitter. So he went pretty hard at it. So he was the lucky winner there.
And it was brand new, don't worry.
Yeah, we hadn't used it yet. So that went out last week. So there was a few people, I think, waiting around to see if we drew the winner before they actually jumped on to buy one. But we're idiots and we forgot to actually announce on the podcast last week. So it's out now. So that's basically it. But what do you think of the product, Dossie?
Oh, it's amazing. I actually just used the other product though, the Weed Whacker.
Yeah,
this week
on Dossie's Nossies.
Nigel Thorne Dossie busted it out, cleaned up those Nossies, and oh boy, yeah.
Did you have to recharge it in between nostrils?
Needed to go the recharge. It's a great product, old Manscaped. We've got the T's on as well. So
yeah, Kays isn't wearing his yet, but
no.
You got to join the club, Kays. Shave that up. Doesn't matter if you're if you're in action or out of action at the moment. Just get it Manscaped and get it looking spick and span when you're ready to go. Anyway,
speaking of my smooth ball call my bald scrote goat from a couple of weeks ago too. I've come up with my new Keeper League name for this year, and I'm really happy with it as well.
Do you want to announce it?
Boy, oh boy, Bowie.
So you've just taken Jack Bowie in our league as well, haven't you? In the
I took him,
league?
I just took him and renamed my team straight after that. So very happy with that one.
Uh-huh.
It was what called before?
It was a Dow-related one, but,
it's Dow season now, though. You just told me that before.
It is. Unfortunately, we heard Sam Walsh going down with the syndesmosis, so yet again, we'll be busting out that song this pre-season for Dow Season 2.0.
All right. We'll get stuck into the podcast now. So, tonight we're looking at Sydney, West Coast and Western Bulldogs, and here we go. Let's get stuck into the first one. All right, finally, I get a team that I'm actually excited to have a look into. Sydney, I had North Melbourne the week before, Port Adelaide, which is fine, but they're just a bit stock standard at the moment. There's not too much exciting going on. There's a lot going on at Sydney, so we're going to talk about a few here. And the first player I'm going to talk about is Justin Mcinerney. So this guy became one of our boys last year, had 9 games in 2020 for an average of 50.4. That was a 63 BCV in 2020. So he looked classy that year on his wing, good distributor of the ball. Didn't quite show us the breakout potential in 2021 that we thought he might move on to. But look, last year he had 20 games for an average of 69.5 and 3 scores of 100 plus in there. And one other score above 90 as well. So he did pretty well there. High numbers look good on Justin Mcinerney, but the issue I think with him, he also had 12 games under 70 points per game. So I think that kind of comes down to role a little bit. So he began on the wing and then transitioned into a halfback role later in the year. And it kind of did coincide with Jordan Dawson's move to the wing as well. Of his 4 scores above 90 in 2021, the thing is, only one of them came playing as a genuine halfback flanker. The rest were either playing in the guts. So he had one game where he had 57% of the CBAs just randomly one week and put up a massive score. And the other 2 tons came from playing on a wing. So the only big score came playing as a halfback flanker was against Gold Coast in round 23. So the thing is, he does look like a fantasy type though, and Jordan Dawson's departure does leave a hole either on a wing or in the halfback. So I expect Mcinerney to fill one of those holes, and I think we'll see a scoring bump as a result, but I think you're more likely to see him score better if he's playing on a wing than on a halfback. I just really don't know where he's going to play. Dossie, what are your thoughts?
I think you guys had way more thoughts on Mcinerney than me coming into this year. I probably, to be honest, I just hadn't seen enough footage of him from last year. So I reckon I'll have to go back to the game tape still. Haven't quite got around to watching my Justin Mcinerney tape from last year yet. But I've just, just looking at the numbers and even what you've just said then, I'm not super keen. I think the young up-and-coming draftees and stuff will probably get that crack. I know he's still a young player though, isn't he? He's a very young player. Yeah. So if he's the guy that gets the gig, fair enough. But I don't know. I just see the other players like your Campbells and your Gouldens having, more weapons to go into those fantasy-friendly roles. But yeah, I know a lot of people are keen on him this year. So
I'm keen, but I think with all the guys you're probably going to talk about, Hef, that there's a lot of conjecture how they all fit. Like Sydney are a team with a heap of exciting young
mouths to feed.
But not even that, just like how many guys can you fit into 22? Yeah. 22, that's the big one.
Absolutely, yeah. The thing is as well, Sydney as well, we've got people like changing roles as well. We've got Heaney going to the midfield, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, or we'll coincide with other things. But yeah, it's just really a really hard team to pick. So many team players to get excited about, but a really hard team to pick. We'll move on to someone to get excited about though, and that's Errol Golden. So Golden had a rapid rise to fantasy fame in 2021. He was selected with pick 32 in 2020, was one of the best rookie fantasy prospects in the 2020 draft class, averaging 106.7 in the NAB League as a bottom ager. So some pretty handy numbers there as a junior. He had 108 on debut and backed it up with scores of 90 and 98 in the following weeks. His scoring dipped, then Sydney announced he had a stress reaction in his foot, so I guess that was probably coincidental there, being injured, trying to play through a few injuries there. He remained out injured until round 15, where he played every game for the rest of the season. His time on ground was reduced throughout that period at the back end of the season, but he still managed to put up some decent scores. He had 2 scores of 100 plus in the back end of the season, and he was selected in Sydney's elimination finals to play against GWS. So it's just good to see him in the best 22 when he's still not 100% by the looks. He spent a lot of time up forward in 2021, hence why he grabbed forward status this year. Kicked a goal in each of his last 5 games. So, yeah, forward in fantasy, as we mentioned. Golden, though, as a junior, he primarily played on a wing, so in the NAB League. And Jordan Dawson has left the Swans, obviously. So one of those wings is genuinely vacant. And I think James Rowbottom had surgery on his foot as well this week as well. I don't know how bad that was. I think it was something like a toe, so it might not be too bad, but I think they're still waiting to see how long he's going to be out for. So there might be some genuine holes for some outside roles for him to play. So I don't know, Kaz, what do you think? Do you think Golden can move into an outside role and become a genuine fantasy scorer, or do you think he still floats between forward and midfield?
I think he'll still float a bit. It's only his second year, so I think they'll still be a bit cautious in what they get him doing. I'm keen on him this year. Did a startup keeper draft the other day with some friends, and I took him in round 7. So when at pick, round 8, so pick 71. So I reckon a lot of people will go high on him this year, especially with that forward status. And I think you should, especially if you're doing startups. I think he's got one who's probably got a couple of good years as a potentially DPP centre forward. So I'm excited about what he can do in the future.
All right. AJ Hawker said in the chat. Yeah, I wasn't actually going to announce who won their dossier, but you kind of made me do it, so it's all good. I just don't know if people actually want to. You asked me who won the thing. I don't think people want to know if they're shaving their people to know if they're shaving their balls at home or something. Maybe I don't know.
Sorry, you guys are making it sound very socially acceptable. So I think
I'm fine with it, but I just think some people might be a little bit uncomfortable with it. That's all. I don't know.
Speaking of, I just wanted to have my thoughts on Errol Goulden.
Yeah,
though,
go nuts, mate.
Talking about fantasy.
Not balls.
Love Errol Goulden and Golden. I don't know. I think it's Golden, isn't it?
It's Golden. Well, they say Golden, but I think because we're South Australia, we can get away with saying Golden. But anyway.
I think, even looking at you at the breakout tracker we've got, he's tracking so far ahead of even midfielders, top 20 midfielders, top 10 forwards. Like his trajectory is just so fantastic. And like you said, he only tailed off, in my opinion, due to that injury.
Yeah, I agree.
think this guy's a star. And, if you listen to the forward ranking podcast that members can have, I've got him incredibly high in my rankings. I think he should be way up on your boards this year, even for a second-year breakout, in my opinion.
I think I've got him in a
He'll
couple.
be 2G for P by round 3.
James Elm in the chat has just wrote, "Oh, Errol." So he's pretty keen on him as well. Anyway, we'll move on to Nick Blakey. I don't know. I've kind of reconsidered this since I wrote this, but I think Nick Blakey might actually make my keepers again this season. Probably states how dire my team is. But no, I guess there's a reason for that, and I'll talk you through it. So last year I was high on Nick Blakey because he was listed as a forward and tipped to play on a wing, and I thought this would lead to an uptick in fantasy scoring, but he just didn't improve his fantasy game. Like he almost looked lost on the wing, kind of didn't have the tank for it, was dropped to the seconds by round 11. So you're probably wondering, why am I keeping him? So after being dropped to the VFL, he returned to the seniors on the halfback flank, and that resulted in him in getting defender status this year. When he was playing on the halfback flank, he didn't put up a score below 63 and averaged 71 from his last 7 games. And throughout this period as well, he also had 2 games where he was injury affected. So I think he came off the ground halfway through the last game of the season. And he also had this random game where he hurt his foot and sat like a quarter and a half off the field and came back on again. In that game where he did come off injured, he actually cracked his fibula, so broke his leg. He put up 68 points from 58% time on ground. So this halfback role really was suiting him fantasy-wise. He just couldn't kind of get a break to actually break out and get through the injuries to actually show us what he could do. So if you take out, I'm not saying you do take out those injury affected scores, but he could have averaged higher if he at the end of the season if he didn't get injured so much. But yeah, when he was playing across halfback, he just looked comfortable. Like he doesn't have the biggest tank, but we saw some great examples of some gut running as well, and allowed him to link up and get up the contest and deliver the ball inside 50. I guess he's a bit taller as well. We can take an instep mark. Is there a permanent spot in defence though? So there's Campbell and Mcinerney back there. Yeah, not sure where he's going to go in terms of fantasy points, even if he does get that role. What do you reckon, Dossie?
Well, I think the height factor might play into it with Dawson leaving. And, before he moved on to a wing later in the year, he was playing as that intercept defender. So whether he has that intercept game about him, I don't know. I mean, we've seen him more as that kind of, when he has played in defence, he's been more of the player that kind of runs and carries with it because of that speed. I am concerned about the time on ground factor for me. Like you said, the tank, unless he's improved on that tank, I'm not sure.
The time on ground numbers weren't awful. Like the only low ones were actually from injury. It's still like, I know it's low for I guess that kind of position, but it was 75% I think around the mark there. I reckon you could boost that if he's not playing on a wing and he's actually
there's
like
a
busting
lot of
himself.
low 70s, 60 here or there. Like I don't know.
I think if he did come off injured quite a few times as well. So I think it's a bit skewed in some of those, but I think it's around a 70 like average time on ground. And that's playing in midfield as well. Playing halfback flank, he could probably spend a bit more time on the field.
I think I can't decide whether I'm keen or not on him because there's the distributing role is going to be there. Obviously with Dawson leaving, but I think it's going to be Braden Campbell that steps in, and you'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably going to be between him and Blakey for the one that gets a little bit of a bump there, and I tend to think it's going to be Campbell first.
I think that a lot of the guys have already overtaken him. Like 2 years ago, everyone was like, "Oh, Nick Blakey's coming," and then he didn't really do a hell of a lot last year. And then we've seen guys like Mcinerney taking the next step. We've seen Campbell's done some exciting things in limited time. Chad Warner came out of nowhere in a way. Errol Goulden set the world on fire in his
But those
first
players
year.
are all not playing across halfback except for Braden Campbell.
But they can.
Is he
Nothing's
training? Is he
stopping them.
training with the defenders?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah. So yeah, like I get what you're saying, but like it's a role that he's just been chucked into.
But could he just play back pocket?
Maybe, but like, what's the point? Like, he's got the height, he's got the kind of burst kind of speed, or not super speed.
I think they've got plenty of guys who've got burst speed. That's not Sydney's issue.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, he just looked good on the halfback flank. They seem like they're pretty keen to play him there, even though he's putting up like getting injured each week. They were trying to get him back into the side. He was a higher end draft pick, academy player. I don't think they're going to waste him away somehow. I think they're still going to try to get him in there. They tried to get him in there as much as they could last year, even when he was struggling. So
it'll be a telling year.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be make or break for him for sure. Braden Campbell, we just talked about. So he had a fantastic start to his AFL career, but then injury interrupted his season. So he averaged 52.5 from 9 games, but showed some promising signs. He played from round 1 and looked comfortable at AFL level. In round 2, he scored 96 AFL fantasy points playing out of defence. He had 21 kicks, 4 handballs, and 6 6 marks and 2 tackles on that day. And then he was trusted with some kick-ins as well in the early games of 2021. Now, we know that Jake Lloyd generally has a monopoly on kick-ins. Well, he did before last year. I think Dawson stepped in there a bit and Cunningham was in there a bit too. But yeah, he was trusted. That's the main point. Like, he was trusted with a kick-in. So this could lead to some good fantasy scoring down the track if he's someone that could take over a few kick-ins. But yeah, he played every game up until round 6 before suffering a stress fracture in his shin. He then missed the next 16 weeks of football. So there's still some debate, I guess, about how Sydney will line up this year, as we mentioned. Who knows who gets that halfback role? Does he kind of go to a wing or, that sort of stuff? I'm not really sure. I'm talking about Blakey go to a wing, and does Campbell just go on the halfback flank and, rack him up from there? It's super hard to tell, but I don't know. Top end talent, pick number 5 in the draft. I'm watching with interest. What do you think?
I love Braden Campbell. You go, Kaz.
I was just going to say I'm a bit cool on him.
Okay. I'm big. I think he's just going to be the one that steps in as the second distributor behind Jake Lloyd. He was kind of playing that role before he also got injured. So a couple of the draftees just got injured and they sort of put him in cotton wool for a lot of the time last year. And if they did play, they played him, limited time or sort of reduced roles. I think Campbell is going to bounce back big in his second year and, be a second or third year breakout. But because he's got that role opening up, he's definitely one that could step up. And like you said, he was taking a few kick-ins early in the year, and I think that's his role in the long term. So whether or not he sneaks a couple here or there and becomes, fantasy relevant this year, that's what I'm looking for.
Sorry, AJ Hawker wasn't worried about announcing his name on the podcast. He was worried about that it's a second-hand shaver that you gave. Let's stress that it was 100% brand new.
Brand spanker. You told me it was refurbished, like when they sell iPhones again and stuff like that.
Well, geez, I need a bit of a clean out after Dossie's using it. But anyway, let's move on to Peter Laddams. Moved to Sydney this season, where many expect him to take over the number 1 ruck role. Last year, he was used mostly up forward at Port Adelaide, chopping out for Scott Lycett when he moved to the bench. There was a period last year where Scott Lycett was suspended, though, and that was between rounds 9 and 13, where Laddams put up scores of 98, 95, 103 and 78 as the number 1 ruckman. So through this period, this comes to an average of 93.5. So when you compare that to games he played with Lycett, so he averaged 65.2 with Lycett in the team. Then without him, he was 93.5. So that's a 28.3 point positive differential. So if Laddams can be the number 1 ruckman at Sydney, he'll be a decent fantasy option. But the big question is, will he get the number 1 role? Now, the man who stands in his way is Tom Hickey. So he was so effective at the stoppages, Hickey was, that I don't think Sydney are going to change that too much. They use players like Joel Amartey, Hayden McLean as like ruck forward options, like genuinely throughout the year. And Dossie.
Big Dossie. Hayden McLean.
Oh, is that one of your mates?
His name's Hayden.
Oh, sorry. I get you. Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
The lawnmower was gone over his head.
It's not even spelt the same. So anyway. Joel Amartey and Hayden McLean were used up there. So this gives me the impression that Laddams might play that same role, that ruck forward role at Sydney. So, however, I think he's in good stead for the future. Like, Tom Hickey will be 31 at the start of this season and rarely plays every game of the season. He generally gets out with injury. I also think that Laddams will be the number 1 option after Hickey retires as well. So Laddams having forward status this year makes him a pretty tantalising prospect. And I think he'll hold on to it until he transitions into the full-time ruck role, which I don't think will be this year, but I think it will be in the short term. So try to get him that transition year, hold on to him. He'll still put up some decent scores at forward. What do you think, Case?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how it all goes. And they seem to love Tom Hickey last year. Like, are they ready just to hand over the keys just yet? I'm not sure. The other thing is they've got a hell of a lot of like ruckmen on their list as well. Like, as you said, that you talked about Amartey and whoever else you said, Big Hayden McLean. But like Callum Sinclair's still sniffing around. Sam Naismith's still on their list. Like, I know their guys are older and injury riddled, but like, I don't know. Do they just see Laddams as just as a forward ruck as opposed to a ruckman? That's my query.
I just don't think those other two guys can ruck at all. And that's like, I think McLean, if memory serves, is like really undersized. He's kind of like that Chrissy Burgess height.
He's more of a key forward.
If he's playing, he's going to be a key forward. So I do think he has that second aspect that the other two don't.
Yeah. I'm with Kays for the short term.
Yeah.
But for the long term, I'm on Laddams. So, yeah, I just don't think it's going to be as big this year that people are expecting, that's all. Dylan Stevens is the next player I want to talk about. So he was taken at pick number 5 in the 2019 draft, and he looked like a really good fantasy prospect. So I think this is a guy that averaged more than Horn Francis playing in the league side. So people are pretty big on him this year. This guy put up better numbers in the Sandford League. Averaged 57 points in his debut season. That was a 71.3 BCV because it was Corona Ball, obviously. In that season, he also averaged 64.3, so that's a BCV of 80.4. So he came home with a wet sail, and a lot of us were really excited about 2021, but he just couldn't get his spot in the team. As an outside player, he just found it tough to crack in with, people like Gordon coming in, Warner coming into the midfield. Along with James Rowbottom not being injured, George Hewitt moving back in there, Jordan Dawson turning into a full-time winger. There just wasn't a spot for him in Sydney's midfield. So when he did play, he just looked out of sorts, or he was just a sub and couldn't get into the game. So he played 6 games. A few of those were sub-affected for an average of 36.8, which is disgusting. Again, sub-affected, a lot of them though. But yeah, his best score of the year was 63 in round 7 against Geelong, but that was his only score above 50. It's obvious just things didn't go to plan for him last year. But looking ahead to the 2022 season, he's reported to be having a good pre-season. Apparently he's put on a considerable amount of size. He's bulked up a fair bit. Longmire was saying in an interview recently that he's just been pretty impressed with his intensity. In his own words, he said he's been trying to add a few more strings to his bow and trying to work on his inside game so he can play a greater variety of role. I think there was even talk of him playing in defence as well in one of their match sims too. So another interesting one there, because a lot of people have described him as like a Lockie Whitfield type as well. So
I was huge on his draft when in his rookie year. Coming from SA boy as well, we saw a little bit of him over here, and then. That's a guy that I did see a lot of the tape from those 8 games in his rookie year, and I was so excited for a second year, and it's kind of baffled me in year 2. I'm really keen to see where he goes in the 3rd year.
I personally think he might be another year away because I'm just not sure where he fits into the side just yet.
I think it's a wing. Like if
that's where he needs to play.
It's open for him if he takes it.
Yeah, but apparently he's training the house down though, so just really monitor that one over the preseason. Oh, they're all training the house down, but yeah, really monitor that one
Turning
over
heads.
the preseason. Yeah, that's it. Before we kind of move on from Sydney, I've got a few honourable mentions here. So James Rowbottom is only slightly B2P. He's never really been 2G, 4P, but he's just in there. I think he averaged 75, and that's with a few injury-affected scores. But I think James Rowbottom just continues to progress. I see him getting like 80, 85 kind of average range to become 2G, 4P, but nothing huge. He started with high centre bounce attendances last year, and he moved into kind of like a wing forward rotation later in the year. So, and the unfortunate thing, I think he said in an interview a week ago, he said he sees himself playing in a wing forward role this year as well. So,
you wouldn't Rowbottom owners or people thinking about keeping him would have been distraught hearing the Heaney news in the midfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone was like, Rowbottom breakout coming this year, and then it's like, oh yeah, we've got another mature body ready to go now. It's
exactly.
Like,
Another one that's kind of could move into that midfield, though, was Chad Warner. So he had a bit of an inside role in the early stages of last year, and he looked great around the stoppage. He got a few awesome clearances and things like that, and he looked actually really comfortable around that centre bounce work. But yeah, he was managed heavily before sitting out with the injury. So I think they tried to manage a few of them through their injuries, but then they just pulled the pin and rested him for the rest of the season.
Where's the hype article for Warner been this preseason?
Yeah, no one's talking about him at all.
Would have really enjoyed one of those.
Yeah, no one's talking about him at all.
It's because he's legit going to be the GOAT.
Talking about his bro coming over to Sydney as well.
I guess the issue is there's just so much going on in that Sydney midfield. So you just another one you've got to watch. But yeah, he played his best footy inside last year, I think, and I think that's his best position. The thing is just there's so much competition in that spot. So we just have to watch that one. Anything else for Sydney, boys?
I think you've covered it well, mate.
All right, let's move on. All right, usually we let Dossie do the West Coast because he's the West Coast man, but he didn't want it, so Kays has taken it. Is that right?
As the love for his dog, Bailey Williams, he just wanted to talk about
that. Makes a lot of sense
purely,
now.
just to be Will.
I get what's going on here. Yep.
So I've got the, I suppose, the job of sorting through the trash at West Coast.
The Mighty Weagles, mate. The Mighty Weagles.
There's a few up and comers there. Could be an interesting season for him this year.
Could be an interesting season.
Will Gould, by the way, that's one you didn't mention.
He's a myth.
I just don't think he's going to play, to be honest. Yeah,
that's all good.
Yeah,
West Coast.
I'll kick it off with Liam Duggan. Now we know that Brad Shepherd retired. Was it late last year? I think with injuries.
This year, I reckon.
Was it this year? It was
concussion.
Early on, I reckon. Yeah, but anyway, in the off season.
Anyway, is it Duggan's season from the back line? It could very well be. So last year he averaged 78.5 in an injury-interrupted year. Last preseason there was talk of more midfield time for Duggo, but it just never really eventuated. Although he did have some nice scores off the half-back flank. He was averaging 96.2 after 5 rounds, which included a 148-point outing against the Pies. He played a couple more games before injury hit, then returned again, only to miss the end of the season with a knee niggle. Now, that knee issue has continued through the preseason, which I'm not going to lie, it does worry me a bit, but word is that he's now training back properly. So just want to watch him over the preseason, because I don't like to get too excited about guys who don't have a preseason under their belt. It doesn't usually spell great years, especially fantasy-wise. Now, I think long-term it's a much better story, because you got to think that Bunga Hearn is in his final year of his career. Obviously, no Brad Shepherd's there, and I think there's a few positives to pick up off that half-back flank. Now, I'm going to assume that Alex Witherden, they've decided is best 22, although I'm still never actually sure. But I think longer-term they can both happily coexist in that back line. I reckon Duggan, he's 25, he could almost push premium defender status. I'm talking, kind of 95 plus. He just needs some luck with injuries, which he hasn't had for quite some time. I reckon he'll slide a bit in a startup keeper league this year purely based on this injury and the delayed preseason. But I reckon he's one to trade target a bit later in the year when hopefully he gets back to his best. Dossie, I know you don't like Liam Duggan, but do you reckon there's some points to be had back there for him?
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Duggan too, because obviously I love his leadership and he's awesome for the club. But he's a great example of someone that lacks thirst. It's not about the disposals for him. It's about winning the game, which is great for West Coast, but not great for a fantasy team. So
absolutely not.
I think you're correct in saying that by chance of West Coast probably diminishing over the next few years, he's just probably going to fall into plenty more disposals, especially if he's playing in the back line like he should be. But overall, it's just he's a player that doesn't excite me for like that ceiling that you're talking about. I think he's always just going to be like an 80 to 85. Happy to be wrong. Might be the West Coast bias going the other direction, but I just never seen. It's kind of like the myth of Will Gould, the myth of the Duggan breakout for me.
You have been on the Duggan breakout for a couple of seasons now, Kays.
Well, it was coming. He averaged 95 after 5 games and then got cruelled by injury.
Okay.
You can't say he wasn't thirsty when he racked up 148 points.
Yeah, but that's his only ton for the year. And he went massive. Richard raises his average over those 5 games. Like
still, his first 4 games awful. His games were in that. They were good games. They weren't. He wasn't really relying on that 148. Yes, it helps, but he would have been an 85.
And it's against Collingwood, who give up stacks of marks. So.
Jeez, you guys are hard people to get on board or train. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the next guy, and I'd really like your opinion on this one, Dos, because I actually do not know why you picked up Sam Petrevski-Seton. I'm just intrigued by what 2022 is going to have in store for SPS. Now, he came to the Blues with a heap of hype, but never really delivered. And in my opinion, it was probably never really his fault either, because he was never given the chance to shine. He played a lot of midfield as a junior and just got stuck in a back pocket or a half-back flank for the Blues and never had the opportunity that he probably deserved. His best was promising. So in 2019, he played a full 22 games and averaged 77. And you're probably like, oh shit, 2020 is going to be a serious year for SPS. But look, fast forward to 2021. Only played 13 games, not much consistency, and averaged 61.3 with only 4 of his 13 games netting results of 70-plus scores. So, interesting pickup for the Eagles. I'm not sure where he plays or even if he plays. For me, I reckon he's a genuine risk-reward pick. People might roll the dice early based on his name and, some of the pedigree he had as a junior. I'm probably more interested in rolling that dice later in a draft, but I just can't visualise where he actually sits in an Eagles lineup. Like, does he sit on a wing when you've got guys like, Andrew Gaff around there? Halfback flank, does he play there? But then we're talking about Duggan, Witherden, Josh Rotham can play a bit higher. Is he just a guy who comes off the bench and plugs gaps, whether it's, through the back wings or forward? He's only 23, so there's someone, will definitely throw him a line from a fantasy point of view. I just have trouble pinning where he's going to be and if he's going to score at his optimum in a particular role. Dos?
Yeah, the coach, I think, flagged like immediately when he came over a mid-forward role or forward-mid, whichever way it goes, depending on, depth. And I think their midfield still, even though, they're a lot of them heading towards the tail end, they're still pretty strong in the midfield. But I think he'll be that mix of forward-mid, which probably having as defender mids, like eventually defender mid status or hopefully defender forward status, but I'm not super high on him, but I'm also excited as a West Coast man. Like, we got him for nothing, and I hope it's kind of pays off.
But if he's playing a forward mid-roll, I don't see that being a big scoring
No, that's
role.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, I probably didn't explain myself. If he has like defender mid and he's playing that forward mid-roll, I don't know. But his scoring, even per minute last year, low time on ground numbers, it was pretty good per minute. And like you said, he has done it in the past. So I'm optimistic as a Weagles truther, but
where would you take him in a draft then? Like, obviously he's not high, but you know, if you wanted to have a little nibble, where would you kind of be prepared to?
It's so hard to say.
Have a little taster.
Yeah, he's not on my radar at all. I would not be picking him up in any draft, no matter where he's.
I'll be picking him late, the late flyer type, late flyer type, maybe in that mid to late, depending on how deep your draft.
I'm just rather taking a punt on just a kid that's up and coming, might not play this year, one that you can stash away over a player like him, I think.
Interesting. One guy who I'm tipping to have a big season is Oscar Allen, a guy who probably has never really popped like we thought. But with Jack Darling jobless at the moment, there's going to be a lot more responsibility on big Oscar's shoulders. Played 21 games last year, but only averaged 58. And this is a drop from his 70 BCV average the year before. Kicked off the year with a 96 against the Suns, and people would have been absolutely ecstatic if you drafted him, but that was his peak. And ended the year with 9 games with scores under 50, which is pretty unacceptable for a guy of his talent, I reckon. He's a forward only this year, which is not surprising because a lot of people think he's a ruck forward, but he actually only won 31 hitouts last year in 21 games, which is kind of crazy for a guy that size. Look, he was thrown around a bit at times last year, played a bit back end as well as forward and, minorly in the ruck. Ended the year with 28 goals, but only kicked 2 goals in his last 6 games. He's 22. I feel like he's been around a lot longer than that, but a 5th year in the system, I think it's time he really starts to show something. Look, as I said, no Jack Darling this year. Josh Kennedy's super old, and they traded Jared Brander for some reason. So he really needs to stand up and make his presence felt. I've always felt he's quite naturally talented, but the big question is where are the Eagles at, and are they contending? And will they be able to feed someone like Oscar Allen enough ball for him to be a decent scorer? Or are they on the slide and it's going to be one of those places where it's a tough club to be at for a young developing key forward? Someone I'd roll the dice on late because I reckon there is upside if all those dominoes fall into place. But yeah, it's very interesting. Hef, I know you love key forwards.
He got injured last week, and as of 8:11 p.m. tonight, articles just come out saying West Coast gun to spend weeks in a moon boot in doubt for early season. So,
well, that was a waste of my.
Could have jumped in a bit earlier there, Hef, I reckon.
I wanted to let him go. No, well, the thing is, like, he still might play early, like he still might play mid-season, and then I think you're still correct with those dominoes kind of falling into place. Like, I was thinking the same thing before, because the injury last week actually said like it wasn't as bad as worst feared, so I wasn't thinking too much. But then I actually just did a quick Google, and like literally 8:11 p.m. it said he's
11 minutes ago.
Yeah, 11 minutes ago he's been in a moon boot. So maybe one to take really late because you're right, because if he's the number one key target he could kick a few goals, but
I'd just replace what you just said with Bailey Williams then, as in the West Coast Bailey Williams to take that role. There's a bit of talk about him playing that ruck forward mix, and he was going to be kind of their fullback plan for Jack Darling, so he's now their fullback plan for both Jack Darling and Oscar.
So it's Bailey Williams season times 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next guy I'll chat about is Connor West. So he's the long-haired midfielder who was plucked out of the waffle last year. The mid-season draftee played 3 waffle games last season, had 27 touches and 6 tackles a game, averaging 106.9 fantasy points. Played 5 AFL games last year for an average of 50.8. Yeah, his 19-touch, 76-point display on debut against the Crows was his finest of the year. Now, the ultimate footy gods, or the fantasy footy gods, I should say, have granted him forward status this year, which is very, very handy. Now, we know he's a top-level waffle talent, but obviously we haven't quite seen what he can do at the top level in the AFL. Now, the Eagles' midfield depth chart really intrigues me. You touched on it just before. Now, you kind of got guys like Xavier O'Neill and Luke Foley who have been around, 3 years now. You chuck in Luke Edwards, who was there last year, and I'll talk about him a bit later. Then you've got, they've recruited mature Adrian Greg Clark. So all the reports are that Connor West has had a really big pre-season, but where does he kind of sit with that next level or next generation midfielder, you could probably throw Petrevski-Seton in there as well, I suppose, or some of the younger guys like Chesser and that who have been drafted. I think that Greg Clark goes ahead from what we've seen, or just for the reason that they drafted him. Because if they were sitting on their stocks and going, oh, we've got Connor West, we've got these guys, they wouldn't go out of their way to go get a Greg Clark. So I think that he's got to be above those guys, in my opinion. But look, with forward status, a late flyer, and if he continues his intra-club, positive chat, he could be worth a sneaky late pick.
Apparently absolutely dominated the intra-club last week, like best on ground, like standards, like playing the midfield, clearances, the works.
Yeah.
Him and Clark were both really good, apparently. But I think it was a mid-forward role they were talking about for him as well. But apparently it was also in the midfield.
I'm like the same wavelength as you, thinking, I'm just like, why? I mean, they draft Clark because he's a gun, and they need midfield depth anyway. And the thought that I actually had coming into this preseason, I'm looking at Connor West, and a lot of people talking up Clark, including ourselves, and he's got the classic hype as well because he's cheap in that format.
Yeah.
But Connor West, they drafted mid-year last year, and they could have drafted Clark at that same point as well, and they chose West. So I'm just like, if you look at it in that perspective, then that he might be ahead of him in that sense. So I don't know. I'm the same with you. Even as a West Coast man, I have no idea where they're going to sit in that sense starting the year, especially given the health of, if their stars are ready to go as well, neither of them might play much. So
yeah, that's true. But there's always seems to be injuries aplenty at West Coast.
Yeah, I know either of those kind of two that have come up from the waffle look like they're going to play a fair bit of footy this year. So
they're 22, 23 respectively, I think. So they're ready to go physically.
I'm excited.
That forward status is just a game changer though if he does get the role. Yeah,
big
be
time.
Taking a late flyer for sure.
Yeah. Another guy who you could take a late flyer on with forward status is Willie Rioli. Now, we haven't seen Willie since 2019. Finished that season with an average of 63.8. He spent 2 years out the game, and it's going to be very interesting to see how he comes back. Now, seemed like end of 2019, he was in a bit of an upward trajectory before his issues, but how will he bounce back this year? Now, I want to say that I reckon he is best 22 if he's fit and ready to go, especially with the news that Jamie Cripps is out injured for a big chunk of the season. So, who's the other guy that's really good? Flying Ryan. So you've obviously got someone like him up there. Willie Rioli will complement him beautifully, especially with no Cripps. So from a fantasy perspective, yes, small forwards aren't always great, but I think what we've seen in the past is he can be a great streaming option. So if you look back to 2019, he beat up on some mid-strength sides in the Crows, had 109 against them, North 92 against them, and Hawks 94 against them. So on his day, he can really light it up. I'm very keen to see how he goes in the preseason, see how he's come back. I'm not tipping him, obviously, for a full-scale breakout or anything like that, but another one we know forwards are light on this year, definitely worth a late flyer who could be a game winner on his day with that forward status. And at worst, he's just a guy you pick up and off the waiver wires throughout the year when you need someone to kind of come in and go bang for your side. Dossie, you'd love some Willie Rioli, wouldn't you?
I'll have him on the field, not so much for just small forwards for me, like streamer, pretty much for me.
I only pick them up as streamers, but if they kick bags, they're kind of handy to bring on. But the West Coast play
he'll play a role for sure.
West Coast play a lot of Sunday over games though, which makes it hard. But
like you said though, job security, they've been dying for him to come back. He should play. If he's healthy, he'll play every game.
Yep. And last but not least for the Eagles is Luke Edwards. Now, he can be my Manscaped smooth ball call this week.
Can I just jump in, Kaz? Because we're real professionals. I definitely plugged the code at the start. And just to make sure that I didn't forget, because I totally did forget to plug the code, use Keeper20 at manscaped.com to get 20% off and free shipping at Manscaped. So look after your balls.
Look after your balls and draft Luke Edwards. Now, I reckon I've got Luke Edwards playing maybe about 18 plus games this year. I reckon they're going to lock and load him in that midfield because to me, he showed some glimpse of class at AFL level last year in his 7 games. Had a 27 touch, 90-point outing against the Tigers last year and ended the season with a pretty average 52.7 average. So, look, he looks to me as one of those players who isn't that quick but has enough polish for it to not matter. Had a few quieter games, which is obviously to be expected for a first-year player, and he did pick up a niggle after a game against the Crows in round 18, where he actually had a 76-point game. And after that, he was just a bit off the boil. Now, I like his opportunity because we've seen Luke Shuey already gets himself injured this preseason, which is not surprising. I know Jared Redden's going to miss a big chunk of footy this year with injury too. So, look, yes, they still have plenty of class in there. You got Sheed, Yao, Tim Kelly, Gaff. But look, they also need to start rejuvenating that midfield too. Plus, previous history says that those guys are likely to break down at some stage too. Elliot Yo.
There we go.
Yao Ming.
But for me, I reckon Luke Edwards is definitely worth a look late in drafts. And if you can stash him, I think he's going to be one who will probably see the best of maybe next year with some good game time this year. So I like the look of him, kind of a smooth mover and one who could lead the Eagles midfield for a few years.
Dossie, I reckon you might rival me on how much someone hates a name mispronunciation. I know you absolutely hate it. But,
Jump in.
Yeah, go.
That's all right.
You called Harry Mackay or Mackay.
I did,
last
yeah.
night,
That's an easier one. That's a more forgivable one, I reckon.
I'll try and correct myself. But no, I actually think you'll be doing a bit of a groomed nut strut after this call at the end of the year because I love it. Kays, it's more of an eye test than the fantasy at the moment. I just think I love the way he goes about it. And I do see him, you know, I don't know whether it's thirst or not, but he just gets in the right spots.
Yep. Smart footballer, like his dad. Yeah.
Really, I love the call, and I think it might be more of a dynasty kind of stash. I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but I see the breakout coming. That strut's coming your way.
I've lost it completely. I don't know what I'm going to say anymore over the nude nut strut. All I'm going to say is I own Luke Edwards on my rookie list. I like what I saw last year, and I'm pretty keen to see what he's got to do this year. So hopefully he can hold down a number, a spot in the side, and he can really show us what he can do. But yeah, he definitely has some fantasy game. Huge underage fantasy score. I think he was the second or third highest.
Second behind Tom Powell.
Yeah, there you go. So
I didn't know he had junior numbers to back it up.
Yeah,
the
all
eye
under
test
18 numbers, but yeah, they were high.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Anything else we want to add to West Coast?
I just think that Bailey Williams, we mentioned it, ruck forward.
Yeah.
I think that,
especially now.
that
We're talking about opportunity
and
then it presents itself, and they've got to do something for when Nick Nack breaks down.
Also, I wanted to say as well, I think I didn't mention it on the Sam Petrovsky season, the tackling upside for him is where he's got some points. So in his best years, he had up to 4 tackles, and it's basically he's only been at 2 for the last couple of years. I think he can actually get his tackle numbers back up if he goes in the midfield. So there is some upside there for that flyer.
Extra 8 points a game there. Beautiful.
That's it.
All right, let's move on to the Dogs. All right, Dossie, what you got for us?
All right. Well, the first guy is actually a star of the competition already, and I got to say though, the Dogs were hard just because all their fantasy relevant players, like this is just the deep cuts again, but the first player is actually the only star I think that I've got here. I'm just looking down. Yeah, he's the only actual genuine star, but in the fantasy sense, he hasn't quite got there yet. So Aaron Norton, I'm talking about. Already a superstar of the competition in terms of how he plays, but, fantasy-wise hasn't got there. I'd say the start of the year, though, if you look at it, his first 12 rounds were actually pretty impressive, and a lot of people started with him last year as that, thinking he's going to be a streamer, ended up having him for, 12
Me
games.
included.
Yeah, I was one of the lucky owners as well. So across the first 12 rounds, 14 disposals, 8 marks, 2 snags, 82 AFL fantasy points. So that'd be way too G for P, especially with the forward status. After that, he had a rib injury in round 14, so after his bye, and then a concussion in round 16, and was just rancid basically after that. So he averaged 8 disposals, 4 marks, 1 goal, and 46 fantasy points after the Dogs' bye. So just completely different ends of the spectrum. You factor in coming into this season, he's got no Josh Bruce, and he didn't average great without him, but he'd already sort of taken that tailspin anyway in terms of fantasy average. Where do you guys see him sitting this year? He's going to be their only avenue to goal. They're a high inside 50 team. I think they finished 4th for inside 50s last year. He's going to get every opportunity to get fed the ball. He's also going to have the number 1 defender on him every single week. Can he replicate the early season form, or is it going to be more just, getting ragdolled every week and not have much of a chance?
I love Aaron Norton more than most people. I'm an owner in our home league, Hef. He's that guy right now where you're like, do I keep him or not in my 16? Because we've seen obviously what he can do the front end of the season, and I know there might have been some excuses in the back end, but you go, yeah, he's still a bit risky as that key forward who hasn't quite evolved. I'm loving the pre-season hype coming out that he's fitter and more firing than ever has before. Mullets flying and all that shit. I'm really down for that. But he's a guy who's kind of I just don't know, and I want to get on board the train, but I just there's that 20% wariness of that end of day still a key forward, and he's still probably got to find some goals to score well.
I think being the number one target with no kind of real good chop out for him makes it hard for him.
When you're talking about Tim English as an elite forward.
Yeah, okay. We'll move on from that. But yeah, I think that's probably where we saw the dip kind of come from. So until Bruce returns, I think he's still easily average 70. And that's going to be fine for a forward this year. So it's not too bad. It's probably not keeper worthy because you can pick up a 70 average in the draft early anyway. So probably not keeper worthy, or maybe you might be able to.
You say that, but you can't look at our podcasters league that we've just started.
You got Dan Rioli will probably get you a 70.
Yeah, but not with any more confidence than Aaron Norton.
Yeah, true. Yeah, fair point.
And in the keeper league, you know that Norton's going to be good for a long period of time, whereas you're taking a stab on, do I pick up Robbie Gray for a year?
That league's a bit different because we keep 20. You're talking about the one where we keep 16.
Still not going to be that much different though, man.
Yeah, I know.
Because especially this year, people are going to keep forwards and they're not going to let anyone who's half a sniff go back into that
I kept
pool.
everyone who could potentially go.
And that's what I mean. This year it's dire.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, fair point. Yeah, you might make a case as a keeper. I just not one you'd love to do that sort of.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm in that boat right now.
Yeah.
The other thing to factor in though is he's 22 years old.
Does
he have that next? Well, I'd assume he's got that next level to go. Where can he become a reliable fantasy scorer? I mean, are we going to see another key forward get to that point where they're a regular fantasy performer?
I've pointed out heaps of times this preseason. The best one averaged 78 last year, and that was Membry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. I think we're on the same page. I do like him as that. F4, F5 kind of
this
range?
year, it's going to be that
F3,
range.
F4?
Yeah, F4.
Yeah.
F4.
All right, let's move on to the next thing. And I've done what Kays has done in his past shows, in that I've gone player comparison as well.
We're really on too much of the same level this year, Doss. I'm not sure about it.
Together, you're sharing players on I don't get it.
This is really just because there's one role and there's two players. I mean, the other person that gets the other role is not going to be really fantasy relevant, and the one because they're going to be the key forward, probably alongside Aaron Norton until Josh Bruce gets healthy, and the other guy could potentially have a relatively fantasy-friendly intercept role. And I'm talking about Tim O'Brien, the new arrival from the Hawks, versus Josh Shackey. So we saw Josh Shackey move into that intercept role late last year. I think it was based on a few injuries in the side. In his first game, he got the 85 AFL fantasy points moving from that key forward role to a defensive role. And it was like, oh, this guy, brought him in for a stream, looked all right. Then I think he put up 2 stinkers to finish the year. Then he was back in the forward line for the finals. So it was he had to fill in for Bruce.
Yeah.
So he had to move back into that role as a forward, which obviously not that juicy for Shackey. He's been training as a defender, I believe, this preseason.
Sorry, did you see the interview that Bont said that he is playing intercept defender Tim O'Brien?
Tim O'Brien. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, so that's probably great signs for O'Brien, probably not for Shackey.
No.
So
if I had to tip one, I'd be Shackey forward, O'Brien back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially because they moved him back as a forward in the finals as well, Shackey, and that's where he's played his majority of his career. All right. Well, let's talk about Tim O'Brien then. He came into his own as well as a swingman, and then finally playing as an intercept defender late last year as well. 19 disposals, 9 marks, and 84 fantasy points across his final 3 games, and it's something that the Dogs really need. Easton Woods retired. And then also you're talking about who just mentioned, the Bont just mentioned, also Caleb Daniel in a recent interview said that O'Brien's the front runner for the role. So I think we've just won the argument on this pod. You guys any interest in Tim O'Brien this year?
This year, definitely. Only because I think Kay's a lot higher than I am. I think he's going to get average about a 70. And you take that in your forward line.
Yeah, forward defender status. So
exactly.
Very handy.
I love those. They're my favourite.
Do you think, what average do you think? Do you think higher than 70?
You're saying so when he was genuinely playing that role, he finished his last 5 games for Hawthorn last year playing that role as 75 with an average. And that was a couple quiet ones in 19 and 20. So I can see him 75 to 80.
The Hawks did have a pretty friendly backline though to play in.
Yeah,
it's like do the Dogs share that? I mean, I thought we all thought kind of Keith was going to go there and do okay in a role, and he's been stanker in terms of fantasy. So I'm like skeptical, but I'd also be willing to punt. But I just don't know if people are going to take him ahead of me because I'm not that excited.
Nah.
Yeah, I think Keith and Cordy are the 2 lockdown options, and O'Brien can play that interceptor, and then you've got your smaller blokes. That's my feel, but I'm keen because I just like back forward status. That just sucks me in each time.
All right.
Let's talk about the man that will benefit.
Oh, God.
Guaranteed. Bailey Williams, the superior Bailey Williams, on this podcast that we've talked about. But yeah, he's just a long-time favourite of mine. I've been a huge Bailey Williams truther for years.
Well, no, didn't you write a storybook about him?
I did write a book about this storybook. He's still just 24 years old, and I reckon B-dubs. He's finally cracked into the best 22 last year for a full season, career best 19 games in 2019. I was really thinking last year was going to be a huge fantasy production, and then the other Bailey Dale came and stole his thunder. Absolute ruined his year. All-Australian Bailey Dale. That was Bailey Williams' spot in the All-Australian squad. So I think he really does have a level to go to, but whether or not he can take his game to the next level with those names around him, he's traditionally been forced to play the lockdown role. I'm just wondering... We're talking about Tim O'Brien being really, potentially fantasy relevant, playing that intercept role. Does that free up a guy like Bailey Williams to go, do his thing, or does that just keep him in the role that he's been in the Easton Wood kind of lockdown role? Because Easton Wood was nurturing Bailey Williams to take his spot.
Oh no, I don't really know. I don't see Western Bulldogs changing the way they play too much this season. So I think it's going to be a pretty similar type role for Bailey Williams.
It's like he had so much potential. So this is 2018 when he was like, 20? He had 20 plus disposals in 9 of 13 games back then. Like that's pretty good considering it averaged up in the high 70s. And then this year, I think last year he only had... I had the numbers written down somewhere. It was barely cracked the 20 disposal number. It might have been like once, and he turned up in his first game of the year and then sort of just didn't get much of the pill. Yeah. And I think it was just going to the likes of Dale and Daniel and those two basically hogging it out at defence. But I want there to be a path for Williams to succeed.
I was just going to say, like, you're looking at their heights, like Williams, Dale are all 187, Easton Wood was 186, and Tim O'Brien's 193. So, like, I think he just takes that spot. The interceptor or that kind of third call spot.
I'm willing to spend a draft pick still on my boy. Cody Waitman's my next player, and I think there should be a little bit of excitement here for a bit of a third-year breakout. Just absolute goal-kicking machine. As soon as he came into the side, played 13 games and just was kicking snags from the moment he jumped on the park. He plays like a key forward, though, which is like so weird. He's 178 centimetres and takes a crap load of marks, which I think is an absolutely fantastic trait for a smaller player, because if he's getting those big mark numbers and can still do a bit on the ground... Unfortunately, he doesn't really lay many tackles. He does play.
But I think the good thing about that, though, is most of his goals are going to be plus 12s, though, as well. So,
that's right. Anyway, any interest in him? I won't spend too much time. I think third-year breakout case heading towards him. I just like the fact, there's going to be snags on. They need people to kick snags this year with Bruce out of the side. We're talking about all the key forwards. Do they just go to their 178 centimetre key forward to kick all their goals?
It's streamer for me. Nothing. I didn't see anything huge. No. Not much bigger. Like, he'll go better than last year, but I don't know how much. Like, he might, an extra goal a game or something like that for his average, maybe less than that, but, might get an extra 6 points per week or something like that. I don't know. What do you reckon?
No, because I don't see any, like, midfield time or high half-forward role, because we've got so many, like Dunkley, Bont can all play that kind of role when they're resting, whereas he needs to be that small coming forward.
Put it this way, though, he needs to kick goals to score well, which shows in his history. But I think, he's going to have to kick a lot of goals, and he will kick a lot of goals this year.
The ball's going to be in the forward line.
Put it this way, I'd be much happier taking the likes of a Waitman over a Willie Rioli, for me personally.
Yeah, same.
Because there's that upside as well. He's 21 years old, heading into his third year.
Yep.
Jamara Ugle-Hagan.
Oh, the guy who took first round in the draft last year.
Did you keep him?
Maybe not. I do think there's a fair bit of upside here. Look, like I said, it's scraping the barrel with the doggies because it's hard to find 6 players. But as a number 1 draft pick heading into his second year, he's basically said, he needed to work a lot on his game heading into second year, sort of work on that professionalism, been working with the Bont in the off-season. We've talked a lot about who fills that role of Bruce. Honestly, in all likelihood, it's probably Ugle-Hagan.
Yeah.
And I think he could come in. He actually scored well in low time on ground. He had a couple of pretty solid games. So if he just bumps that time on ground, he's going to kick goals with the amount of forward entries that the Dogs are going to get.
Yeah.
19 years older, he's still a massive prospect in the fantasy world. I don't know if I'd be, that keen.
Fantasy wise, no, but he might free up someone like Norton a bit more if he comes on a little bit more as well. So
honestly, could be a streamer though this year. I think there's going to be bags he's going to kick this year.
Yeah, but I think it would be good luck guessing when it's going to happen.
Yeah. Keep an eye though. Low time on ground, very, very poor rookie season from what was expected. He's a number 1 pick for a reason. Watch year 2. My manscaped nut feel on this one is Riley West.
No more gut feel. It's a nut feel.
It's Riley
Feel
West,
it in your nuts.
son of a genuine fantasy gun. His old man, old Pops. What's his name? What was his dad's name? Scott West. God.
John West.
Memory is fading after playing so long ago. But from 2002 to 07, he averaged over 90, including a 169-point explosion in 2007, round 5.
Whoa.
Did a bit of research with this one, boys. Yeah. But anyway, Riley West, he's had an absolute tough gig to crack at AFL level. They've got a stacked midfield. He's got the mid-forward status because he came into the AFL side to play forward. Plays entirely as a midfielder in the 2s. Just averages well in the VFL. If there happens to be multiple injuries at the Dogs, the fact that Lipinski's gone helps him. Ling Jong's no longer there. Toby McLean's recovering from an ACL. I mean, there's a chance he goes into the midfield at some point this year, even if it's just as a COVID replacement. And as a forward, we might end up seeing a streamer for the lad. He averaged 99 fantasy points in the VFL, I think, last year.
You can have him. He's just too small.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. I've been trying to get through those last few because I don't think they're going too well. But you did well to actually find some players for us to talk about from the Dogs there, Dossie. So
Thanks, mate.
Good job.
Did my best.
Right.
That was the last one.
Yeah, it was. So, let's move on, I reckon. You good to go?
Yeah, I mean, that was the last. That's our final team.
Yeah,
Final
team analysis. Yep, sorry. Yeah.
Pre-season's done.
Yeah, that's a long one. Now we have to actually find something to talk about next week because we've got a bit of a content filler
The
week.
bus.
But
Everyone has to name their bus.
We could have a bus week. We'll have a chat about this. Anyway, I'm a station wagon. You're a bus, and you're
Double
a coach.
decker.
Maybe that's how it's actually going to have to work. Anyway, if you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining up as a member and supporting us. If you do support us and join up as a member, we put out a whole heap of bonus resources for you to get your hands on. Now, last week I put out the advanced stat categories spreadsheet, which just has like a whole heap of all the stats on afl.com.au. Instead of looking at them week by week, you can look at them like a season averages. So, you've got your rebound 50s, you've got spoils, you've got kicking efficiency, you've got clangers, you've got marks inside 50, you've got all this kind of random stuff, which actually might actually help you spot position changes and stuff later on, actually, when you think about marks inside 50 and, defensive rebound 50s and things like that.
Category leagues are rising up.
But that's what it's about, yes. For the categories, also there's a few Supercoach numbers in there with the efficiencies and stuff like that could help out. Plus, hit outs to advantage is a big one. I was talking to Stevie Fizz. He was pretty keen on those numbers, getting those ones in there as well. So, so I put all those into a spreadsheet and, that's available for members on our website for gold and silver members. But we've also been putting out rankings for the last few weeks. So tomorrow, this is Monday night now, so tomorrow and Tuesday, the forward rankings come out. So we've also got draftee fantasy scores, state league fantasy scores, breakout tracker, many more bonus resources up there for us, for our listeners to get involved in. Sign up as a member. There's a link in the description below, and you'll dominate your league with all those extra stats. I'll read the members this week because I haven't done it for a while. So thank you to these gold members. We read out 10 each week for people to sign up. So thank you, Adam Robinson, Daryl Smith, Lachlan Monfries, Danny Haggerty, Alexander Binks, Phil Brackia, Nathan Ayres, Kevin Paul, Mason Davey, and David Singleton. I actually picked a week where there was easy names to read out. So
I'm just looking at this. I actually hadn't checked out your spreadsheet. This is very impressive.
No, thank you.
You put your face on that one again up on the side?
Absolutely. I'm not letting you guys take credit for that. I want everyone to know who's responsible for this.
You've even got bouncers in there.
Yeah,
who led the league in bouncers last year?
I haven't sorted it,
He's
mate.
sure
You can do it
still.
right now. You know how to sort it.
Oleg Markov.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Doesn't
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all. Actually, now you say
when
it.
you think about it.
Yeah.
Lockie Bramble coming in at third.
Yeah, nice. Anyway, we're going to review this week. So, but also make sure if you're on Spotify, you're rating us as well. We're slowly climbing the ranks there, getting our ratings up. I think we're still at 4.9, so that's good. But we got one on Apple Podcast from The Wolf saying, great pod. Dos is a great addition to an already stellar lineup. Dos bringing the pizzazz, Kay's the Oracle, and Hollywood Hef. Doesn't really say what Hollywood Hef does. He's just there. But anyway, become a gold member and get some great content. These guys know their stuff, even if Kays did say Petrarca was no good. Fact. So
I retracted that. Yeah, it was because he was playing a stupid half-forward role.
You've protracted that statement.
I did. Like Sam McClure.
all right, we're getting silly now, boys. We need to start moving on. So let's get on to the listener questions. All right, boys. First one's from Jason Beck. Will Dylan Stevens lock down a midfield position? What's your nut feel, boys? Will he lock down a midfield position, Dossie?
Yeah, I reckon. What is that 1 year contract he got as well from last year?
I think. Yeah.
I think he's got to really, capitalise and try and make that big contract for when he comes back home to SA.
Kays, what's your nut feel? Does he lock down a midfield position?
No, but it'll be around the mark.
Yeah.
I think Josh Kennedy's in his last year, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and then who kind of jumps into that. I reckon it will be a job share this year.
When he does lock down one, do you think it's inside or outside? You're in the wing or in the inside? Because he's been trained to play on the inside.
Yeah, it's tough.
But
I think it's a mix regardless.
Yeah,
I think
it's gonna have to be.
it's going to be a mix.
Yeah, I don't see him locking down one this year, but I think he's definitely one to watch for the future. James Elms asks, does Witherden nail down a spot in the West Coast 22 this year, or are we more likely to see SBS and Campbell Chesser playing that roll-off halfback? Dossie, as a West Coast man, what do you think?
Yes, I think for starters, I think SPS is tagged, like we said, playing that mid-forward role.
Yep.
That's what they've sort of pegged him to be playing. Chesser, I think they're sort of flagging as a potential wing replacement down the line. So I think firmly, yes, Witherden's locked down that best 22. Whether or not he's got the same ceiling as they look to change the game plan up a bit and go away from the less of the chip mark, more direct footy, who knows? But I love Witherden, and all this be a big Witherden truth. I couldn't believe when West Coast got him. Huge fan. So yeah, he's going to be playing every game, I think, because he's the logical Hearn replacement. In a year's time when Hearn hangs him up.
Yeah, I think that's probably the person who's going to come in, and it should be a pretty fantasy friendly role if he does get it. So
they need to get games in him. He's one of the few kind of young players that.
How old is he? It feels like he's been around for ages.
I think he's like 23.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's young still.
Yeah. Next one, Craig Morano, James Rowbottom with a big exclamation mark. The Enigma, the headband, 7 or 8 tons for him this year. What do you reckon? 7 or 8 or less or more?
Less.
Yeah, I think less. I think if he's playing that wing forward role.
And you said he's injured as well.
Did something with metatarsal surgery on a metatarsal fracture, so that's not too bad. That's just a toe, isn't it? They said they haven't had they don't have a timeline of when he's coming back though.
Oh yeah, it's so hard to gauge who's playing midfield at Sydney.
Metacarpal, is that that's
probably
a finger?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah, so he should be okay. I think he might get 2 tons for the year. I reckon that's my smooth ball call.
Is the time on ground ever going to come, or is he just one of these theoretical guys like the Braden Sire, which is he scores well in low time on ground. I think he can get it up.
I don't know.
I think he is a future gun. It's just the Heaney stuff was that came out of nowhere. We've got a new midfielder to contend with. And like you said, does Warner step up? Does Stevens get some time? I don't know.
Scott DeChico? I'm going to go with that. Does Oliver Florent break out this year with Parker and Kennedy aging, or is Heaney's potential move to the midfield hamper that? I think there's been an Oliver Florent breakout touted for about.
We haven't even spoken about Oliver
That's
Florent.
the myth.
Yeah, he's a myth.
I'm not a huge fan.
No Ollie Florent breakout.
The other thing is, people want to write off Luke Parker, which I think is bad.
Yeah, I agree.
He's 29. He's consistent as ever. Hardly misses a game of footy. And if anything, he's just going to be like a mid-forward, into the latter part of his career. He'll probably spot with Heaney or someone like that going forward. So I don't think Luke Parker's disappearing from that midfield in the next 3 years. So Kennedy, yes, but Luke Parker's basically their heart and soul.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah, for sure. At Yeet Brigus, who would you keep out of Dale, Zeeble, or LDU in a team contending for a flag? Dossie, what do you reckon?
I don't know what you guys think, but I've got between Dale and LDU based on your list structure. Like if you're weak in your defence versus your midfield, you got to kind of weigh that up. But Dale coming off that All-Australian, I didn't realise he was All-Australian until I was doing my research, but All-Australian season
now that you mention
it
rings a bell.
Just 25 years old, and what's going to change, we've kind of talked about. I don't think much is going to change in that Dogs defensive line apart from your O'Brien coming in. So I think, Dale and Daniel are still going to be the 2 distributors there. LDU, I do see a breakout coming, like a big old breakout.
Like 100+ breakout?
I don't know. I think he's more of a super coach beast than an AFL fantasy. Quality over quantity for me, like contested ball, that sort of thing. So the fact that Cunnington's out as well for a little bit, and Greenwood coming in, I don't know. I don't want to say Dale over LDU if LDU explodes, but at this stage, I think he's probably the safer option in your defensive line.
I agree with you. I think I see Dale and Zeeble averaging the same this season, like around the same mark, around that 80, mid-80 kind of mark. I can see LDU going higher, but given the defender status, you take the defender, I think, out of those two. And Dale being the better long-term option, I think it's the best call.
And I just drafted Dale in our Pro Keeper League, so I'm higher on him now than I was about a couple of hours ago.
All right. Anything else you want to add to that one? Who would you take, Case? Out of Dale, Zeeble, and LDU? Just quickly.
Let's back in LDU because a midfielder can score more than a half-backer.
Cool. No love for Zeebs. We just saw Luke McDonald's going to go back there today.
Yeah.
Was that your call?
The thing is with Luke McDonald though, like that's role dependent. It's not actually player dependent. It's who gets that Aaron Hall role. And I don't think there is an Aaron Hall role this year because their defence was putrid playing that role. I think they actually start playing some defensive footy and it just doesn't matter. That's my take anyway. Anyway, we'll wrap it up from there. That's the end of the podcast for another week. The end of our team analysis podcast. We need to think about something to talk about next week, boys, but I'm sure we'll get there. Follow us.
You could have a cruise ship, Dos.
A cruise ship worth of players. All right. We'll start thinking about players that go on our bus. The official bus episode. Maybe that's happening. Anyway, let's wrap this up. So, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Get around Keeper League Pod on all of those. Make sure you support our sponsors, Manscaped. Use Keeper20 at manscaped.com. You support the sponsors, you support us. So you're helping us out if you need a ball trimmer or some ball deodorant or some ball toner or a weed whacker if you've got nossies like Dossie.
Nigel Thorne.
You might need one. Yeah, you might need one with an extra large battery though, but so make sure you pre-purchase that one in there as well. So anyways, that's it from me. Anything else from you
Don't
guys?
forget to listen to the best episode of the Pod ever.
Okay, I think you're gonna go rogue and just leave this and be Pod full time, Case.
He did say he really enjoyed it, which it shocked me.
Maybe you just love classic now as well.
Yeah, I love classic.
All right, thanks for listening for another week, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.